Hello and welcome to How Do I BI, a mini-part screencast series on SQL Server Analysis Services 2008 based on my book, Smart Business Intelligence Solutions with Microsoft SQL Server. This is Lynn Langit. I'm a developer evangelist with Microsoft in Southern California. This edition of How Do I BI is going to drill into understanding AMO warnings for OLAP cubes in bids. Before we go to the screencast, we'll take a look at the FAQs and gotchas. Under FAQs, the first point for us to consider is that you can ignore AMO warnings. These appear inside of the bids of visual designers for dimensions, cubes, so on and so forth as blue squiggly lines, and when you pass your mouse over them, then you will get a tooltip which will explain why the warning was triggered. Also, when you attempt to build or process any of the objects in bids, these will appear in the error list. You can ignore these. However, you shouldn't, and I'll explain why in just a minute. Also, you can configure which items will appear under AMO warnings, and I'll show you how to do that in bids in the screencast coming up. Under gotchas, you really shouldn't ignore AMO warnings. In production situations, a very common cause of inappropriate or inadequate cube query performance or excessively long processing times is poor design. And we built these warnings new in SQL Server Analysis Services 2008 specifically to address these concerns and challenges that our customers have had with understanding best design principles for OLAP cubes. And I kind of referenced what I just said as the second bullet point. Poor structural design is a key cause of poor query performance. In particular, dimensional hierarchies designed incorrectly and inadequate aggregations because of poorly defined or missing attribute relationships between dimensional hierarchy members. Be aware that the AMO warnings are somewhat limited in that they do not warn on inefficient MDX queries. Also, AMO warnings are specifically and only for OLAP cubes. There is no set of warnings around data mining structures, data mining models, or DMX. And with that, we're going to go ahead and go to the screencast. We're going to take a look at the newly added AMO design warnings for OLAP cubes that are available inside of the bids designer. So to do that, we're going to look at a couple different aspects. The first thing that I've done is I've opened up the sample AdventureWorks and I have selected a dimension that has some AMO warnings so that we can understand how they're going to appear in the various objects. So I've loaded the promotion dimension into the dimension designer in bids, and you can see by looking at the designer that we have two AMO warnings for this dimension. The first one is under the attributes section where the dimension name is shown along with the attributes that we've selected out of the data source view. So if we pass our mouse over the promotion, it's telling us that there are duplicate key errors, and it's warning us we should change the key duplicate property of the error configuration so it's not set to ignore the error. And to do that, we would just go into the properties of this particular object. So we'd go to the error configuration over here under properties, and we would set a custom error configuration and open that up, and then configure the key duplicate error and change the default from ignore error to report and continue or report and stop. So that's an error that was found in this particular dimension. An additional error that was found is in the hierarchy, which we've created out of the attributes category type and promotion. If we pass our mouse over this, it's going to tell us that attribute relationships do not exist between one or more levels of this hierarchy, which could result in decreased query performance. Now, it's important that you be reminded here that there are two types of hierarchies for dimensions. The hierarchies are what's called natural or navigational. A navigational hierarchy can be created between any attributes that are available in a dimension, and there need be no relationship between the data. And by relationship, I mean a parent-child relationship where, for example, if you had categories, subcategories, and names of products, there would be progressively fewer members of the higher levels, and they would be related to one another by some value. In other words, categories had a subcategory and subcategories had members for them. If you chose to make a navigational hierarchy, like we've done here where we have category, type, and promotion, the attribute values need not have a natural relationship. However, do understand, as the warning is telling you, that this could result in reduced query performance because MDX queries will have to calculate at each of the levels that are defined rather than making use of stored and pre-calculated aggregations. And I will again remind you that if you go to the Attribute Relationship Designer, this is where you would go to address this problem. The reason I'm pointing this out in particular is this is one of the most common problems that was found in Analysis Server 2005, OLAP cubes and dimensions in particular, and in fact the Attribute Relationship Designer was added specifically so that you could better visualize and work with the attribute relationships. So that's just an example of one problem. To get a sense of all the different warnings that the AMO new warning section will capture, there is really almost a hidden section over here on the Solution Explorer. If you click on the name of the solution, so AdventureWorks, and then right click and then click on the Edit Database Context Sensitive menu option, you will see that there are two tabs here, and one of them is General and just basically gives some general metadata about the project itself. But if you click on the New Warnings tab, you'll see inside of there that we have the Design Warning Rules. And if we open these up, we can take a look, for example, well, first let's look at the top level, which is Cube, Data Source, Database, Dimension, Partition, and Aggregation Design. These are all the areas that AMO warnings could appear. And by default, they're all enabled. One of the things that you can do is if you have a design that you know will not comply to one of these suggestions, then you can disable the warning by removing the check mark next to it, and that will show up under dismissed warnings and you no longer get the blue squigglies. We do recommend that you leave these on. They can be ignored. You can still process. And of course, obviously, you try to fix and address all the issues that are warned on. We don't have time in this screencast to go through all of the various items that are being warned on, but we'll highlight a couple of them and I'll encourage you to explore on your own. So you can see, for example, under cube design, one of the items that's being warned on is avoid creating measure groups that have the same dimensionality and granularity. And the reason for that would be to avoid redundant data coming into your cube. Notice if we expand out under dimensions, the very first warning is the one that we did see. This is a very, very common issue that occurred in OLAP cube design. Avoid creating hierarchies where attribute relationships do not exist between one or more levels. Avoid specifying more than one non-aggregatable attribute per dimension, so on and so forth. So it's a very, very important set of warnings, and I do give it to you as a tip that you should, by right-clicking over here on the solution and clicking Edit, open up the warnings, look at all of them, and attempt to fix all of them, because that's going to result in a more performant and a better designed cube. Thank you.